Hey everyone, my name is Nico Rodriguez, and I am on the organizational board for Comic IndieCon 2023. And I am so happy to be hosting a series of video interviews with some of our creators that are going to be at the show this upcoming year. And by the way, the show is going to be December 2nd in Houston, Texas at the Spring Street Studios. It is the triumphant return of Comic IndieCon. It's been on hiatus for a few years, but we're coming back strong now with a fantastic and amazing creator lineup. So definitely mark your calendars because you're not going to want to miss the show. It's going to be a show that's all about indie comics, all in the spirit of indie comics. So it's going to be fantastic. And speaking of amazing creators, we have one of those here today. He is a comic book writer, a journalist, a teacher. He is also a formal Marvel researcher. His name is Mr. Kevin Garcia. Kevin, man, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you. It's funny you said Mr. Kevin Garcia. I'm so used to, I'm part of a podcast called My Primos Podcast, and the co-host always says Mr. Kevin Garcia.com. So I was half expecting you to say .com.
Almost. Next time.
I'm glad to be here, though. I love the idea of IndieCon. I've worked at a lot of conventions, but my favorites are the ones that are about the small creators and about the artists themselves. Don't get me wrong, it's fun working with celebrities, but to me, like the really fun ones are the artists and the writers and the creators.
Oh yeah, definitely, man. I think all in the spirit of here's the thing with indie comics, right? In any kind of comics, you have a brain, you have a pencil, you can make something, and I think that's why I'm really excited that Comic IndieCon is back this year because there's going to be a ton of new creators, ton of new aspiring creators, tons of networking going on. So it's going to be awesome.
I'm glad you said networking because to me that's actually both an interesting and it sounds like a dirty word to say, but like usually when I go to events that are all like indie creators, people make such good friends that remain their friends for many years. There's a lot of indie conventions I've been to where like we keep track of each other regularly. Hey, where are you going to be? What are you doing? Or just what book you working on? And it's like networking sounds weird, but like if you have any desire to make comics, go to an indie con.
Oh, entirely, man, entirely. Because not only like will you find like collaborators, but you'll just find people to like hang out with and like talk comics. Because sometimes the people who know a ton about comics, you can't find them in like just random places. You've got to go to like these indie comic shows and stuff. So yeah, it's good stuff, man. But we're happy to have you, Kevin. Let's go ahead and kind of just start off with a little bit about kind of your comics origins. I know a lot of podcasts, a lot of interviews, they kind of start with that. But so maybe talk a little bit about like your first introduction to comics, and like specifically what I'm specifically after is like the eye-opening experience of comics is kind of the thing. For example, mine is the first time I read Sin City by Frank Miller. I was totally taken aback by it. And it really kind of showed me what comics could be. And I think that, it led me into a path of like indie, more alternative comics. So, maybe what are some of those moments in your comics career that you could think of?
You know what? I like that you talked about being inspired as a reader. I got into comic books as a reader kind of by accident. I'm the oldest in my family in terms of brothers and cousins and all that stuff. But like among my friend group, when I was a child, I was the youngest. And for whatever reason, at my friend's house, we all decided that we were going to play video games, back when there was only one or two players on the Nintendo, in order of oldest to youngest. Now, when I say we decided, it occurs to me that I probably wasn't part of that decision. Either way, I was last. So while they were playing, I was reading my friend's comic books. And I remember distinctly one of the first books I read, I thought they had the weirdest looking characters in it. Gone back to look for it. It was Acts of Vengeance, Captain America. So, it was like you have like Magneto and you have like these Dr. Octopus arms and all these really colorful characters that I just thought was ridiculous. And then my friends kept telling me about this new thing they all heard about called the Ninja Turtles. And they kept saying it's going to be this really big thing and there was going to be a cartoon series and all this other stuff. And I thought, okay, cool. And I wanted to be cool with my friends. So one day I'm out at a gas station with my parents and I see Archie's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1, the mini series, the very first, of the publicly, because Ninja Turtles was around in the earlier 80s with the Mirage comics, but this was like the first one that really went out there.
Right.
And I bought it for one reason only, to show my friends, I got this before you did. And, and they didn't care, but I was hooked. So then comics just became my life after that. It's just I got every single issue of the Archie Turtle comics, and I got into X-Men shortly after that, and Infinity Gauntlet. I've been listening to a podcast lately where people who don't read comics are listening to Infinity Gauntlet or reading Infinity Gauntlet, and they're talking about how confusing it is. And the thing is, I had no idea who any of these characters were, but it made sense to me, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And I got so involved over the years that I wanted to make my own stories, but by the time I got to college, for whatever reason, you ever heard the term a fear of failure? I feel like I had a fear of success. Like I was worried that if I succeeded in doing something, people would expect more of it. So when I became a professional writer, when I was like 18, 19 years old, it was as a journalist. And it was just basically telling other people's stories. And so I still had my own stories, but I just kept them locked away. And I would gravitate, of course, to the bigger stories. I talked to historians about these neat little bits of history or folklorists about mythology and things like that. And I'd write those articles. And then eventually I got a job working for Marvel. And that was weird.
Yeah. But, that's pretty incredible, man. I mean, so, you're kind of, you're growing up with the Infinity Gauntlet. You said X-Men books. I mean, so you got this job so was the Marvel researching job, was that like the beginning of your comics career, you would say? Like, or were you writing stories before that?
It depends how you define it, right? Like, I certainly wasn't publishing comics before that, but I was, any chance I got, interviewing creators to tell their stories. That's how I first got to meet people like Javier Hernandez, who makes El Muerto, and he does the Latino comics or Latinx Comics Expo in California. And how I got to talk to like Peter David and Eric Larson and other people, because I just wanted to write about comics. I got to interview Stan Lee and
wow.
Stan Lee, there's a weird story about that Stan Lee thing. But the point is that wasn't really in comics.
Come back to that one.
Yeah, but that wasn't really in comics. Yeah. And then you know what the official handbook of the Marvel Universe is?
Yes.
This was Marvel's encyclopedia basically. Well, that had existed in the 80s and early 90s, and Marvel was going to bring it back in the early 2000s. But by that point, they figured there's a lot of fans that are already doing this online. This is before Wikipedia, and they said, why don't we just have the fans do it? So they reached out to a group of fans and said, why don't you guys make our new handbooks? And I was not a part of that group, but I knew these guys kind of online, sort of. And I said, take me with you. And they're like, no, we don't know you well enough. And I was like, then about several years later, they contacted me because they knew I had some old 1940s comics that they needed. And I said, look, I can help you. But by this point, I've been a professional writer for over 10 years. Let me do something for Marvel. And they were like, fine. And then I got to write for the official handbooks for 10 years. I actually got paid by Marvel and actually was there part of the Disney acquisition in a weird way. And so I got paid by Marvel and Disney to read comic books. So that was cool,
man. That's incredible. So, I mean, I know this is a indie comics show and everything, but I mean, I'm sure me included and the viewers are pretty mesmerized by that idea of, read comic books, research and write it down. Is it as glorious as us outsiders view it?
It was horrible, but it's really fun to say. No, it wasn't really horrible. It was fun to say I did. I didn't get paid much. All right. I mean, they paid me very little, but like, it was just cool. And in fact, everybody in our whole department, none of us did comic books professionally. Like all of us had another job, right? Like one guy was the head of veterinary medicine for North Florida. Another guy was a college professor, people all over the world. And I was a high school teacher and a reporter,
Yeah.
But the fun part was when I got my first check, it had Spider-Man on it. And they told me, hey, we can do direct deposit. It'll be a lot faster. And I said, I know, but I want the Spider-Man check. and then when the Disney purchase happened, they no longer put Spider-Man on it. You know what they put instead?
Mickey Mouse. Nothing. Okay.
It just said Marvel Comics. And I was like, oh, they could at least put a mouse on there or something.
All right. Now switched it to direct deposit after that.
Yeah. But well, I guess I was on for a few more years after Disney took over.
Man. That's pretty. So, was it a full-time type of job, or were you doing it like in a part-time?
No, it's technically they weren't hiring me. Technically, it was a freelance. So they were hiring the company of Kevin Garcia, and I was the only employee. So I wasn't technically an employee of Marvel. They would hire out, so we were freelance. So basically, it was a job by job thing. And every 1 year I'd do like 30, 40 pages worth. Another year I do 1 page worth. So it just depended on the,
Okay. Interesting, man. Yeah. So before we leave that Marvel topic, how about that Stan Lee interview? What's that story that you got?
So I mentioned that I would interview anybody I could just because I could. In fact, my editor once asked me, like, why do you keep interviewing all these people? Like, I got to interview Guillermo del Toro right before Hellboy came out.
Wow.
And my editor was like, why are you doing this for the city paper? None of these people are coming to our city. And I said, I'm bringing the world to us. And she's like, okay, yeah, I just wanted to interview people. Well, I interviewed Stan Lee, and it's for one of the movies coming out at the time. And at the end of the interview, I did something you're not supposed to do. I asked for a favor, and I said, Stan, you and I are never going to work together, not officially. And I said, but everybody you've ever worked with, you gave a nickname to. So what would you nickname me if I worked with you? And right off the bat, just like that. By the way, personality-wise, exactly like he sounds on TV. He was always on the entire conversation, just completely, Stan. Anyway, right off the bat, he starts coming up with all these neat nicknames, and I write them down on my computer. And the thing is, I was saying this before we started recording, I have a very bad short-term memory. I'm great for like fictional stuff, not good for real things. So he gave me these cool nicknames, and I wrote them down on the computer. And then they did an update in the office at the newspaper I was working at, and I lost all my notes. And all I could say was, I remember Stan, gave me some nicknames, but I don't remember what they were. And then about 10 years later, I'm working with the, Marvel, and one of the other researchers says, hey Garcia, did you know Stan mentioned you in a comic book? And I said, what? Because Stan's Soapbox, where every month Stan would pick a topic to talk about whatever he thought was important, whether it was, women's rights or racism, or just sometimes what a fan asked that day. Well, he put Kevin Garcia from Brownsville, Texas, asked, what would I nickname him? And he put all the names in there. The nickname showed up in the comic book, and I could be Killjoy Kevin or Glad to See Ya Garcia. And I appreciate that he didn't do the easy Kevin from Heaven thing. He didn't do that.
Nice.
So yeah,
I like that. What was the Garcia one again?
Glad to See Ya Garcia.
Glad to see it. That's so Stan Lee, dude.
It really is.
That's amazing. Dude.
Right off the bat, though, he didn't even have to take time to think about it. Just like, oh, well, you'd be this.
That's such a great story, man. That's awesome. So like, okay, so then in terms of, okay, so you have your Marvel stuff. So how did you kind of transition to making your own comics from there? I mean, you said that you had stories from you were a kid. Was it like a inspiration from your childhood, or did you just kind of have something after the fact of like all the years of working through Marvel and something from there?
Oh, the stories evolve over the years, so it's like this. Like I said earlier, I had a bunch of ideas, and they weren't even like, oh, this idea from childhood or building the same idea. No, it's just different ideas. They come up all the time, and sometimes I'll pull back an old one and rebuild it and whatever. But I really loved the idea of writing original comics. I did get, while I was at Marvel, a chance to write in character a few times. I got to write, for example, as Steve Rogers writing a letter to President Obama about the heroes and the villains, like what he thought of them. I got to write, one of them I got to do was, I was going to do the life story of Namor, and I told them I wanted to do this as a character, and they gave me permission. So I did it as Namora, a character who had a crush on him for 80 years. So I did that, and I was really proud of it. But I wanted to do original stories.
Yeah.
The trouble is with Marvel, people have asked me, well, how do you break into Marvel? And it's like, well, that's the thing. You don't. They call you. And the truth of the matter is while I'm working on the handbooks, I'm not really going to get a call to write an original story. They want to see me having written other things. So I said, you know what, especially with the pandemic and everything, I have to sit down and make my own stuff. So
yeah.
I did. And I made an indie comic, did a Kickstarter. It easily made its money that it needed for publishing.
Nice.
So now I'm not really doing freelance for Marvel anymore. I haven't been doing that since 2009. No, 2009 is when I started. 2018, 19. Numbers are weird, right? I'm a teacher.
Yeah.
I don't teach math. But yeah, it's been about 3 years since I wrote for Marvel, and or 4. And And
So
yeah,
that
now I'm doing my own thing.
so that first book that you came out with, so you first book that you've created, first Kickstarter that you ran and funded and everything, man.
Mhm.
That's got to be pretty positive, huh?
Yeah, very much so. And it's one of those things where I knew it was a good idea. I knew people would support it. I will say the actual creation process was a bit of a struggle for reasons that I don't want to get into, but it was a pain. So I stepped back a little bit after that.
Yeah.
But the story itself was we called it Teoat, which basically translates to holy water, essentially.
Okay.
And the idea was that twofold. Number one, I love how I've always loved mythology. I mentioned that earlier when I was talking about it, and I know that anywhere in the world, I can ask somebody who Hercules' dad is, and everybody
Mhm.
knows. And now I can go around and say, "What's Thor's favorite weapon?" and everybody knows. But
Mhm.
like, who knows about Tezcatlipoca? You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I really wanted to, make that kind of like that mythology, that history of Mexico, and make it more of a pop culture thing, something that's accessible, by more readers, by modern day readers.
Right.
And so that was one half of it. The other half of it was I was tired of seeing all these stories that showed the fall of Tenochtitlan, the fall of the Aztecs. Oh, the Spaniards got here and that's what's going to happen. I was like, I don't want to hear about them dying. I want to hear about the beginning. So I
Yeah.
wanted to write a story about the founding of Tenochtitlan. And so I did a ton of research. I did months and months and months of research where I went through all of these books that were some of them written, in the codices from before and during the conquest, and also some written during the colonial period where the Spaniard Catholic priests were just writing down what they were saying and to kind of collect that oral history. And then, of course, some from modern historians kind of collecting and filtering through that. And I wanted to kind of combine all of these different origin stories for this culture and make one solid mythology for this story.
Yeah.
And I really only got one chapter out, and like I said, it was very heart wrenching at the time. So I want to go back and reapproach that story someday.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so I think that's one of the big things that I guess maybe people that haven't made comics quite yet is, collaboration and things. Like it's certainly something to get used to,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
all there is, unless you're a cartoonist and you're kind of writing, drawing everything is kind of under your control. But once you start bringing, artists, letters, colorists, all those types of, you start putting responsibilities in other people's hands. And like, I know for sure, like me, there's been a few cases where, when I've written a story, I write and draw all my stuff now, but there was a while ago when I was working with some artists, and like it was, some things are just kind of like, man, like these things just aren't moving like I want it to. And so maybe that might have been some of your pains that you went
well,
through and
I like
struggles
that
that.
you said about trying to get to manage it so that one of the things that some of my friends have said is that like I love creating, I love being part of a team. I don't want to be in charge.
Mm,
So some of
yeah,
my friends have been like, next time you do this, I'll manage. I'm like, fine, you do that.
yeah.
you know so like next time I do a Kickstarter, my friends like, I will run the Kickstarter. I'm like, I'm okay with this, you do that.
Yeah,
Because it's I'd rather just work on the story and have somebody else give me a deadline. I need to get it done in 3 weeks. I'll get it done in 3 weeks. If you tell me to
totally.
do it by myself, it's not going to get done.
Totally, man. Like that's like the same here. Like I just want to be sitting down either writing or drawing. All this like marketing stuff,
Yep.
all this like, format my files for printing. Like I don't no, I don't love doing that stuff, but I know it's necessary. So
It's like
um
those necessary evils. Just find somebody else to do that.
dude, yeah, completely. So okay, so you got Theowad out there. And kind of what was your I know that you have a middle grade novel coming out
Yeah.
pretty
So I
soon?
have a middle grade book that's already been announced. It's in terms of like reading level and style. Think of like the first Harry Potter book where there's like chapters, but there's drawings kind of spaced throughout it. Um, and it's licensed material. So I don't own any of it. I said earlier that I want to tell my own stories. I'm still the one telling the story, but like somebody else owns it, I'm totally okay with that. It's just part of the business. I was
Right.
hired by the Mass Republic, which is a company that manages IPs for like wrestlers and especially Mexican wrestlers. And the goal was to have a story about luchadors that you could have with for kids to read and get inspired by, but also to show a little bit of the culture and things like that. And I am a massive fan of like the old like El Santo movies and the Blue Demon and a lot of these other heroes that would go off and fight monsters while wearing the mask, but then they'd go home and they'd read the newspaper and they'd still be wearing the mask, and they'd be talking on the phone and they'd still be wearing the mask. I love that concept.
Yeah,
and so when they approached me and said, "Hey, would you want to do that?" I was like, "Yes, I would." So the story is actually about some real life wrestlers, Dragon Lee and his family. There's a real family of wrestlers from Mexico. And I'm reimagining them not as the adults they are now, but as like 10, 11, 12, 13-year-olds that are fighting monsters in Mexico, and specifically monsters of Mexican folklore. One of my goals was to have monsters that have been in stories since at least colonial times. So there's no La Llorona, there's no Chupacabra, which is actually Puerto Rican. Instead, I have creatures that are from like Mexico that the colonial scribes write down. Like there's a what now in the river, that kind of stuff. And so one of the creatures they encounter, for example, is Ahuizotl, which is it's like a little water dog that has the tail of like a spider monkey, but at the end of that tail is a monkey hand. And I realize that's very creepy, but I also find it very adorable. I find it kind of like a Pokemon.
Yeah,
and,
sure.
So I just want that to become like part of their little team there.
Dude, that's awesome.
Yeah. So I got to do this with the Master Public, and it's going to be published through a company called Future House Publishing. I don't have a date for the publication yet, but that's mainly because they are working on a translation. They want to publish it simultaneously in English and Spanish. My Spanish is nowhere near strong enough to do that, so I said, somebody else. And they're also looking for artists to do the art and the cover and that kind of stuff. So that's going to be fantastic.
But as far as like written, it's already written.
Oh yeah, it's been done for months. It's just like I said, there's the whole rest of the team, the translation, the drawings, all that other stuff.
Awesome. Let me just back up 1 second here. Schooling wise, so you're a English teacher, or?
So I've been an English teacher and a journalism teacher. Currently, I'm teaching journalism, publications. My students make magazines from scratch. Yeah,
gotcha. Awesome. Yeah, I just wanted to get that in. So were you like educationally? Did you major in journalism or something like that? Did you go to school for it? Not in the least.
In fact, I also did major in education. I got an English and history degree, two different degrees in bachelor's, and specifically made sure not to get a teaching certificate because I told my parents, we're both teachers, I am not going to become a teacher. I look at all the stress you guys go through. I'm not going to do that. And then I did that. So now I've been teaching for about 16 years. I got an alternative certification for that.
Gotcha.
And I was a journalist, but you don't really need a journalism degree to be a journalist. It just helps to have a degree.
Right.
I mean, the one place where it makes a big difference, if you go to a big journalism school and then your professor knows somebody at the New York Times, that helps you get a job. But other than that, it really doesn't matter as long as you have a degree.
Right.
And then I have a master's. My master's degree is in everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
That's a fantastic master's degree.
So it's called a master's.
Where do you get that one?
It's not. Yeah, really. It's called a Master's of Interdisciplinary Studies. And it's supposed to be a master's that basically has 2 or 3 majors. Mine has like 4 or 5.
Wow. Okay.
But still counts.
Yeah.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. So people keep telling me I should go back for my doctorate, and I'm like, it was a lot of work getting those the first time. I'm just happy.
Graduate school is enough work in itself. I don't know about anything after that. But no, the reason I wanted to, and you kind of mentioned it there, so you got this educational thing. So what was your kind of connection to get your publishing deal? Was it somebody that you maybe met like in the schooling ranks, or did that come naturally after the fact?
So, I mentioned that all of these things interconnect, you know what I mean? So like there's as a reporter, there's as a creator, there is as a speaker at Comic Cons, because I also speak at Comic Cons a lot. I host panels and I give talks. And through those, I've made connections. I will say the person who put my name in the hat for that book was Hector Rodriguez, who makes El Pesojero, who is I've always described it to people like the original Golden Age Superman, the one that couldn't fly but could jump over tall buildings and had, his bulletproof skin and always fought for individual social justice. That's basically his character, but he does that on the border.
Yeah.
And so when he was working with people at Master Public, he's like, hey, here's some people to consider. And, they gave me a call. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, I've met Hector once or twice before. Super awesome guy.
Yeah, he really is. And
Yeah,
we're talking about doing small conventions. He runs a small convention as well, the Texas Latino Comic Con out of Dallas. And it's like, it's a great way for creators, especially creators of color, to meet each other.
yeah, definitely. I saw that convention. And I was like, man, it was kind of a little too late, but maybe next year I might want to check that one out. It looks great. Do it. I got it. That's awesome, man. 'Cause, yeah, I mean, just you mentioned like how great it is kind of going to like these smaller conventions. There's tons of networking, tons of like-minded people kind of going around at these conventions. So you can meet connections, meet friends, meet other creators, all this kind of cool
want to
stuff.
add another bonus to that. When people go to one of the really big conventions, they might find something in Artist Alley they like, but a lot of people are there just for the celebrity autographs, right?
Yeah.
But when they go to an indie convention, they're there for the artists. And so I feel like if you have a table there, you're more likely to sell stuff than you would at the. I'm not telling people not to do the big ones. Don't get me wrong. I work the big ones a lot. I like the big ones, but I really appreciate things that focus on the artists.
Oh yeah. No, totally. 100%. I think you're right in that regard. What was the name of your middle school novel? Did we get that?
We don't have a name yet. It's
Don't have
going to
a name
be
yet. Okay.
called Dragon Lee and something. I've given them some title suggestions. They're figuring it out. Basically, with that one, they basically just said, here are the characters. Here's what we want you to do. Have at. So I did that, and I pulled in a lot of stuff from my own family history and also stories that I've collected over the years, but also things that I like. For example, one of the first things I said was I wanted to make sure that the kids always wear the mask.
Yeah.
And the initial editor I worked with said, well, they have to take off the mask sometimes. And I'm like, no, they don't. That's the point. And the guy from Master Public, he's like, oh, you get it. He gets it. And I was like, yeah, that's the point. Because like, that's the fun of it. Like they never take it. Like there's one character, Duralistico, who has a full face mask. So I make sure and make a point of it that whenever he eats, he turns around so no one can see him. Because
I love it.
You can't see that he takes the mask off because he doesn't. It's always on.
It's kind of like Mandalorians,
Exactly.
never take the helmet off, no
it's
matter
funny
what.
I think I was probably starting to write that when season 1 was already hadn't even happened yet. So I don't even.
Yeah.
A bit.
No, that's all, dude. That book sounds awesome, man. I
didn't
can't wait to
Mandalorian connection until you said that. I'm like,
yeah, it's all good, man. It's an awesome concept. So, love that stuff. But so you're going to be at the show, right?
Yes, and I'm very excited.
Yeah. So you're going to have a booth there. You're going to have some of your books and everything, meeting, chatting up with other creators, other fans. It's going to be awesome. Kevin, remind me you're doing a panel too. Is that right?
Well, I'm doing at least 2 or 3 panels. I'm not sure what all they are. I know they've sent me a few. I'm definitely excited. My big thing is I've often hosted panels, and I'm good hosting panels. I enjoy doing that. But it's always kind of fun when I'm a guest on a panel, because when I'm hosting, I feel like I'm kind of not able to throw out my own opinions quite as much. But when I'm a guest, I'm like, oh, I get to say stuff.
Right. Yeah. No, that's fantastic, man. So I think that kind of does it for this interview, Kevin. I appreciate it so much.
Well, there is one other thing I have.
Go ahead.
So I'm going to have, when I'm there, I'm going to have books. The Teoat, it's not going to be published online. I'm not planning to publish it online, but I have some physical copies that I'll bring. I also will have several of my Marvel books, the handbooks that I worked on, and the other individual issues. But I have a book that was going to come out this year, and it was supposed to come out before this event happens, but it's actually going to be coming out next year. They pushed back for the schedule. They're going to have it's from Chispa Comics, which is an imprint of Scout Comics. And what Chispa is doing is they're really trying to push Latina creators and saying, let's do stuff with them to kind of push them to the forefront. And what I'm part of is an initiative called The 13, and it's going to be 13 young superheroes that are all inspired one way or another by the 13 day signs of the Aztec calendar. And my story is going to be number 13. So mine is currently has a publishing date of October of 2024. So I may have some art that I can show then from the artist who I'm working with, who's this great artist out of Matamoros. But it doesn't publish yet, but soon.
Dude, that's fantastic. Hope you have some of some of that artwork. See, but yours has to be super epic, right? Because it's the last. It's the last one in the arc.
So when they asked me, what do you want to do? They gave me a list of characters, and all the characters were just nothing but like a name and a one-line description.
Mm-hmm.
And this one said Coneja, and it's rabbit in Spanish.
Yeah.
Latina squirrel girl. And I was like, I want that one. That one. And then for a villain, I picked one of the strongest villains they have in there, who's basically Latina Sabretooth. And it was like, what happens when you pit an eternally optimistic hero who never loses against an actual serial killer that cannot be stopped? Yeah. And I was like, that's the story I want to write. So that's what I did. And I'm really looking forward. I've seen the art already. Martha Ortiz, she goes by Pastel de Soriana on Instagram. And man, it's looking amazing. I'm really, really, really getting excited.
Dude, that's fantastic. I cannot wait to see that. Hopefully, I do hope you have some artwork you can kind of sneak peek by the time December 2nd comes around, and we can kind of see some of that cool stuff. But
run it by the editors, I will.
But definitely, guys, all you viewers out there, definitely check Kevin out. He's going to have some awesome stuff at his table, and give him a good chat, man. This man is a wealth of knowledge. He can really give you some good insight. Kevin, where can people follow you on social media? Kind of keep up to date with your stuff.
Most places, two places, Instagram and TikTok. I am at Kevin Garcia _com, like kevingarcia.com, but an underscore, you know. And honestly, the only place that I really post with any regular, schedule is TikTok. I post several times a week, if not several times a day. Gotcha. It's weird. I'm not a very tech savvy guy, but for some reason, I just kind of fell down the TikTok hole, and I'm really enjoying it.
Oh, gotcha, man. Yeah, I haven't got onto the TikTok bandwagon yet, but I'm sure it's inevitable, right?
Okay, so I'm not gonna lie, I spent a year watching it every single day, just taking notes, mental notes. After a year, I was like, I can do this. And so, yeah, jumped on about November of last year. So
gotcha. Yeah, I'll get there at some point. But for now, my most active place is on Instagram at Nico_writes. I'm also a cartoonist as well, posting tons of sketches, tons of process shots in as well.
And I was to say, my partner picked up your issue at I think it was Comic Palooza. And I told her I need to read it. I haven't picked it up yet. She's still at her house. I gotta go get it.
Awesome. But anyway, thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you very soon.
Thank you for having me.